Now to a fascinating new story, because researchers at the British and National History Museums have uncovered the earliest evidence of an ancient human settlement.
The people of Oregon is the fact that here in this shallow sediment that we're standing on is a record.
What they uncovered in Oregon challenges everything we know about early humans. Archaeologists in Oregon have uncovered evidence of an 18,000-year-old human settlement.
We're finding a lot of domestic items. Most of them appear to have been manufactured between 1880 and perhaps 1910 or 1920.
Thousands of years older than experts believed possible. The tools, remains, and layout don't match what history taught us, and that's where things get unsettling. Follow along as we break down what was found and why it's shaking archaeology. The discovery that changed everything. Picture this. You're standing in the middle of the eastern Oregon desert, surrounded by nothing but sagebrush and empty land. The wind howls across the landscape, hot and relentless. There's no water for miles. It seems like the last place on Earth where you'd make a groundbreaking discovery about human history. But in 2012, archaeologist Patrick O'Grady and his team from the University of Oregon were digging at a site called Rimrock Draw Rock Shelter, just outside the tiny town of Riley.
So Rimrock Draw is an archaeological site in Oregon, and it is a rock shelter.
They were carefully excavating, layers of dirt and sediment, when one of the volunteers, a man named Chuck Moreland, found something that would shake the entire archaeological community to its core. It was a simple stone tool, an orange agate scraper to be exact, beautifully crafted, clearly made by skilled human hands. But here's where things get absolutely wild. When they sent this tool to the lab for analysis, scientists discovered something remarkable. There was still blood on it. Not just any blood. This was the preserved blood of an extinct species called Bison antiquus, a massive creature that made modern buffalo look tiny. The tool was buried deep beneath a layer of volcanic ash from Mount St. Helens. That ash has been dated to over 15,000 years ago. According to the basic laws of geology, anything found below that ash layer has to be older than the ash itself. Much older. Dating the impossible. The team didn't stop with just one discovery. In 2015, they found another scraper. This one buried, even deeper in the sediment. The natural layering of the rock shelter told a clear story. These tools were ancient, but exactly how ancient? Scientists conducted radiocarbon dating on tooth enamel fragments found at the same level as the tools.
This is the sample preparation laboratory for radiocarbon dating.
The results came back, and they were shocking. The fragments were 18,250 years old. Let me repeat that. 18,250 years old. Dr. Thomas Stafford Jr. from Stafford Research and Dr. John Southen from the University of California, Irvine conducted multiple rounds of testing. The dates kept coming back consistent. This wasn't a fluke or a mistake. This was real, solid scientific evidence. What makes this discovery even more remarkable is what those tooth fragments belonged to. They came from animals that no longer exist anywhere on Earth. One set belonged to camelops, an actual camel that stood 7 feet tall at the shoulder and roamed North America for millions of years before, vanishing around 13,000 years ago. The other fragments came from that massive Bison antiquus, which was about 25% larger than modern bison and had horns that spanned 3 feet across. The Clovis theory. Crumbles for almost a century, archaeologists operated under what was called the Clovis first theory. Since the 1930s, scientists have believed that the first Americans were the Clovis people.
Clovis first theory, a prevailing belief of 20th century archaeology in the United States, that humans began arriving in the Americas about 13,000 years ago.
Named after distinctive spear points found near Clovis, New Mexico. These artifacts were dated to around 13,000 years ago, and they showed up at sites all across the continent. The theory was defended fiercely. Any researcher who proposed earlier dates was often dismissed or ignored. The scientific community had decided, and the case was closed. Or so they thought. But the Rimrock Draw discovery is pushing that timeline back by more than 5,000 years. That's not a small adjustment. That's a complete rewriting of North American prehistory. And here's the thing. The Clovis theory always had a major logical problem that nobody could solve. According to the old theory, humans walked to North America through a gap between two massive ice sheets covering Canada. But geological studies show that this ice-free corridor wasn't passable until about 14,800 years ago. So if people were already in Oregon 18,000 years ago, they couldn't have used that route. They must have arrived some other way. The volcanic time capsule. One of the most fascinating aspects of this discovery is the volcanic ash layer. When Mount St. Helens erupted over 15,000 years ago, creating what scientists call a geological timestamp. Volcanic ash acts like nature's filing system, preserving everything beneath it and marking a clear line in time. Chuck Moreland, the volunteer who made the initial discovery, described finding this coffee cream-colored material in the ground. It would appear and then disappear as he dug. He recognized it immediately as tephra, which is volcanic ash. Each volcanic eruption has its own unique chemical signature, like a fingerprint. Scientists can analyze the ash and determine exactly which eruption it came from and when that eruption occurred. When Moreland found the camel teeth fragments beneath this ash layer, he knew he had found something significant, but he kept digging. 10 centimeters below the camel teeth, he found the orange chalcedony tool with the bison blood. The deeper you go, the older the artifacts get. It's one of the fundamental principles of archaeology called the law of superposition. The natural layering at Rimrock Draw told researchers that these stone tools were even older than the 18,250 years old camel teeth. How much older? That's still being studied. But the implications are staggering. Life in the Ice Age. So what was life actually like in Oregon 18,000 years ago? Forget everything you think you know about the modern Oregon desert. During the Pleistocene epoch, also known as the Ice Age, this region was a completely different world. The climate was colder and much wetter. Where you see dry desert today, there were massive pluvial lakes. These weren't small ponds. Lake Malheur alone covered about 919 square miles. Other giant lakes filled the Catlow Valley, the Alvord Desert, and the Warner area. The now dry basins in Lake, Harney, and Malheur counties were full of water, surrounded by rich grasslands. Glaciers existed in all the mountains of Oregon, even the Steens Mountains in Harney County. The landscape was lush and green, teeming with life. And not just any life. This was the age of megafauna, the giant animals that seem almost mythical today. Imagine standing in that ancient Oregon landscape. Herds of massive camels move across the grasslands. Bison the size of small cars graze alongside them. Mammoths trumpet. In the distance, ground sloths lumber through the vegetation. Saber-toothed cats prowl, hunting for prey.
A saber-toothed cat. Its teeth, its killing technique. This predator was designed to hunt large prey.
This wasn't some prehistoric fantasy. This was real, and humans were there, living among these creatures, hunting them, surviving in an Ice Age world. The master craftsman. Let's talk about those stone tools for a moment, because they tell us something important about the people who made them. These weren't crude, roughly hewn rocks. They were finely crafted orange agate scrapers. The craftsmanship was exceptional. Creating a tool like this requires skill, knowledge, and patience. The toolmaker had to understand the properties of the stone, how it would fracture, and how to shape it precisely. They had to know which types of rock would hold an edge, which would work best for scraping hides or cutting meat. The fact that bison blood was still preserved on one of these tools after more than 18,000 years is remarkable in itself. It tells us these tools were actively used for processing animals. The people at Rimrock Draw weren't just passing through. They were living here, hunting, butchering their kills, making use of every part of the animals they caught. Archaeologists believe the Rimrock Draw site was used as a temporary shelter. The shallow overhang provided protection from rain, wind, and the intense sun, depending on the season. A permanent stream ran adjacent to the shelter during the earliest occupation, providing fresh water. It was an ideal spot for ancient hunters to make camp. The indigenous perspective. Here's something that gives me chills. When scientists announced these findings, Dr. David Lewis, a professor of anthropology at Oregon State University who received his doctorate from the University of Oregon, made a powerful statement. He said this early date aligns perfectly with the oral histories of the tribal nations in the region. Many tribes have stories passed down through countless generations about witnessing major geological events. Stories about the Missoula floods, a series of catastrophic events that changed everything for the tribes between 18,000 and 15,000 years ago. Think about that for a second. These aren't just stories. These are memories, preserved through oral tradition for almost 20,000 years. The tribes also have histories of encountering giant animals, what they described as monsters on the land. For years, outsiders might have dismissed these as myths or legends, but the evidence at Rimrock Draw proves that these stories were true. Ancient peoples did interact with megafauna. They did witness these geological events. The giant animals in their oral histories weren't mythical creatures. They were real animals like camelops and bison antiquus, and they may have become characters in what Dr. Lewis calls our histories of the time before memory. This discovery validates indigenous knowledge in a profound way. It demonstrates that oral histories can preserve accurate information across time spans that seem almost impossible to modern minds. The Missoula floods connection. Speaking of those geological events, let's dive into the Missoula floods, because they were absolutely terrifying in the true sense of the word. These weren't regular floods. These were some of the most powerful floods to ever occur on planet Earth. During the Pleistocene, massive amounts of water were locked up in glaciers and ice sheets. Sea levels were more than 300 feet lower than they are today. In what is now Montana, glaciers dammed up a series of large valleys, creating enormous freshwater lakes. The largest was Lake Missoula, which along with other lakes like Lewis, Condon, and Allison, covered about 14,000 square miles. Around 15,000 years ago, the ice dam holding back these lakes broke. What happened next was catastrophic. A wall of water destroyed about 16,000 square miles of land. The flood was hundreds of feet deep and traveled at speeds that may have reached 50 miles per hour. It left behind ripple marks 50 feet high and 500 feet apart, created under water depths of at least 1,000 feet. And this wasn't a one-time event. Scientists believe approximately 40 to 70 of these massive floods occurred between 15,000 and 12,800 years ago. The people living in Oregon during this time would have witnessed or heard about these apocalyptic events. Imagine seeing a flood that could reshape entire valleys and carry boulders the size of houses. The older sites. Debate. Rimrock Draw isn't the only site challenging our understanding of early human presence in North America. Cooper's Ferry in western Idaho has provided evidence of human occupation dating back more than 16,000 years. Meadowcroft Rock Shelter in Pennsylvania has been dated to at least 16,000 radiocarbon years old, or 19,000 calendar years old. Sites in Chile, Texas, and other locations have all shown human presence before the Clovis period. The evidence keeps piling up, but not everyone is convinced. Patrick O'Grady himself has noted that there are still many archaeologists who refuse to accept the new data. He said there are a lot of people who don't want to believe there's anything older than Clovis, and it's something that's become pervasive in archaeology. When your entire career has been built on one theory, it can be difficult to accept evidence that contradicts it. The resistance to change is strong, but what makes Rimrock Draw different is the consistency of the evidence. O'Grady stated it's not so much that they have such old dates, but that they're getting consistent results. Multiple tests, multiple samples, all pointing to the same conclusion. The radiocarbon dating has been replicated. The stratigraphic evidence is clear. The volcanic ash provides an undeniable marker. The coastal migration theory. So if humans didn't walk through an ice-free corridor in Canada, how did they get to Oregon 18,000 years ago? Scientists now believe they may have traveled along the coast. This is called the coastal migration theory, and it's gaining serious traction. During the Ice Age, sea levels were dramatically lower. Wide continental shelves along Oregon's coast were exposed, providing a potential migration route. People could have traveled by boat, following the coastline, stopping at favorable locations to fish, hunt marine mammals, and gather shellfish. This theory makes sense for several reasons. Coastal environments provide abundant resources. They're generally more hospitable than the interior during an ice age, and if you have boats, you can move much faster and farther than you can on foot. The problem is that most of the archaeological evidence for coastal migration is now underwater. When the glaciers melted and sea levels rose, they drowned the old coastlines. Sites that might prove this theory are now 300 feet beneath the ocean surface, making them extremely difficult to study. But sites like Rimrock Draw, located inland but dating to this early period, support the idea that people were already established in the region long before the ice-free corridor opened. They had to get there somehow, and the coast is the most logical route. The extinction mystery. Here's a question that still haunts scientists. What happened to all those giant animals? Camelops, bison antiquus, mammoths, ground sloths, saber-toothed cats. They all vanished around 13,000 to 10,000 years ago. The Pleistocene megafaunal extinction wiped out dozens of large mammal species across North America. There are two main theories. The first is climate change. As the Ice Age ended and temperatures warmed, habitats changed dramatically. The lush grasslands began to disappear. Lakes dried up. The animals that depended on those environments could not adapt quickly enough. The second theory is more controversial. It's called the overkill hypothesis, and it suggests that human hunting played a significant role in these extinctions. When humans arrived in a new environment, they encountered animals that had never seen people before. These animals had no fear of humans and were easy prey. The truth is probably somewhere in between. Climate change and human hunting likely worked together to push these species over the edge. The evidence from Rimrock Draw shows that humans were definitely hunting these animals. The bison blood on the scraper proves it. But were humans the primary cause of extinction, or just one factor among many? We may never know for certain. What we do know is that by about 11,000 years ago, most of these magnificent creatures were gone. Only smaller animals like modern bison, elk, and deer survived into the present day. the technology of survival. Living in Ice Age Oregon required incredible knowledge and skill. The people at Rimrock Draw had to master fire-making, toolcraft, tracking, hunting strategies, hide processing, food preservation, and seasonal migration patterns. These weren't primitive people stumbling around hoping to survive. They were sophisticated hunter-gatherers with deep environmental knowledge. The stone tools found at the site show evidence of a practice called bloodletting and butchering. The scrapers were used to clean hides, remove meat from bones, and process animal carcasses. Every part of an animal would have been used. The meat for food, the hides for clothing and shelter, the bones for tools and weapons, the sinew for thread and binding. Archaeobotanists are currently studying plant remains from ancient cooking fires at Rimrock Draw. This will tell us what kinds of plants people were gathering and eating. We often focus on hunting when we talk about prehistoric peoples, but plant gathering was probably just as important, if not more so, for daily nutrition. Fire was essential for survival in this environment. It provided warmth during cold nights, light in the darkness, a way to cook food, and protection from predators. Learning to make and maintain fire was one of the most important skills any person could have. The ongoing excavation. The excavation at Rimrock Draw has been happening since 2011 under an official partnership between the University of Oregon and the Bureau of Land Management. That's more than a decade of careful, methodical work. Archaeological excavation isn't like what you see in movies. It's painstaking, slow, and requires incredible patience. Students from the University of Oregon Archaeological Field School have spent summers digging at the site, sifting through dirt.
Pathway Oregon allowed me to take a bunch of different courses and discover what exactly I wanted to do, which led to me discovering anthropology.
Cataloging every tiny find. They work in units, carefully removing sediment layer by layer, documenting everything. A single flake of stone might seem insignificant, but it could tell scientists about tool-making techniques. A small piece of charcoal could provide another radiocarbon date. Heather Ulrich, the BLM Oregon and Washington archaeology lead, emphasized the importance of good stewardship of public lands. She noted that damage, destruction, or removal at an archaeological site is a federal crime. People need to leave what they find and not collect artifacts or harm archaeological sites on public lands. This is crucial. Every artifact that's removed from a site without proper documentation loses its context. Archaeologists don't just care about the object itself. They care about where it was found, what it was found with, how deep it was buried, what layer it came from. All of that information is just as important as the artifact. Rewriting the textbooks. What does this discovery mean for our understanding of human history? In simple terms, it means we need to rewrite the story of how and when people first arrived in the Americas. The old narrative of Clovis first is dead. The new evidence is too strong to ignore. Humans were in North America earlier than we thought. They may have come by sea instead of by land. They lived alongside extinct megafauna and survived in harsh Ice Age conditions. They had sophisticated tools, complex knowledge systems, and the ability to adapt to changing environments. The discovery at Rimrock Draw is one of the oldest known human occupation sites in North America. It rivals sites like Meadowcroft in Pennsylvania and Cooper's Ferry in Idaho. Together, these discoveries are painting a new picture of early American prehistory. But we're far from having all the answers. Additional testing of other camel and bison tooth fragments is currently underway. Researchers are analyzing more stone tools and flakes. Each new piece of evidence helps fill in the gaps. Patrick O'Grady mentioned that the summer of 2023 marked the completion of the final archaeology field school at Rimrock Draw. The team worked on several units where more Ice Age animal remains and artifacts provided supporting evidence for the 2012 discoveries. But the analysis of all this material will continue for years. The human story. At its core, this discovery is about people. Real people who lived and loved, struggled and survived, thousands upon thousands of years before us. When you hold an 18,000-year-old tool in your hands, you're touching something that another human being crafted with their own hands. You're connecting across an almost incomprehensible expanse of time. Patrick O'Grady described it beautifully. He said that as archaeologists, they're always thinking about what it was like for people back in those times. When they find artifacts buried in a place like Rimrock Draw, it's almost like touching hands across the pond. You're making connections over many thousands of years and meeting those people firsthand. Think about what those people experienced. They watched volcanic eruptions paint the sky with ash. They witnessed floods that could reshape the landscape. They hunted animals that no human being alive today has ever seen. They looked up at the same stars we see, but from a world that was completely different. They raised children, told stories around fires, created art, mourned their dead, and celebrated their victories. They were just as human as we are. They had the same basic needs and desires. They wanted safety, food, companionship, meaning. And somehow, despite challenges we can barely imagine, they not only survived, but thrived. Their descendants became the indigenous peoples who Europeans encountered when they arrived in the Americas. The oral histories preserved by those tribes have proven to be remarkably accurate, maintaining memories of events from the deep past that archaeology is only now confirming. The volcanic eruptions they witnessed. Let's talk about something that sends shivers down my spine. The people living at Rimrock Draw lived through multiple catastrophic volcanic events that transformed the entire landscape around them. Scientists have identified ash layers from at least 3 different eruptions preserved at the site. Mount St. Helens wasn't the quiet, peaceful mountain we knew before 1980. During the Ice Age, it was incredibly active.
Of Mount St. Helens in southwest Washington state, imponderables dust the air like volcanic ash.
Erupting multiple times over thousands of years. Each eruption would have been a terrifying spectacle. Imagine seeing the sky turn black in the middle of the day. The sun disappears behind clouds of ash. Thunder rumbles constantly, not from storms, but from the explosive force of the volcano. Lightning flashes through the ash clouds, creating an apocalyptic scene. The ash would fall like snow, covering everything in a thick blanket of gray powder. It would clog water sources, kill vegetation, and make breathing difficult. Animals would flee or die. The landscape would be transformed overnight from green grasslands to a gray wasteland. Yet somehow, the people survived these events. They adapted, moved to safer areas temporarily, and eventually returned when the land began to recover. What's remarkable is that volcanic ash, while devastating in the short term, actually enriches the soil over time. The nutrients released by volcanic material make the land incredibly fertile once plants begin growing again. The people at Rimrock Draw may have learned this pattern. After an eruption, wait for the ash to settle, wait for the first plants to return, and then the animals would follow. It shows a deep understanding of ecological cycles and environmental recovery. The water world of ancient Oregon. When we look at eastern Oregon today, we see high desert. Dry, harsh, unforgiving landscape where water is scarce and survival seems difficult. But during the Pleistocene, this region was a water wonderland. The difference is almost impossible to imagine unless you really study the evidence. Lake Malheur, which today is a relatively small seasonal wetland, once covered nearly 1,000 square miles. That's larger than the entire state of Rhode Island. The Catlow Valley held a lake that was over 40 miles long. The Alvord Desert, now one of the driest places in Oregon, was once a deep freshwater lake surrounded by marshes and wetlands. Warner Valley contained another massive lake system. These weren't shallow ponds. Some of these pluvial lakes were hundreds of feet deep. Shoreline terraces and beach ridges are still visible today in many locations, carved into the hillsides like bathtub rings, showing where the ancient water levels once stood. Geologists can read these features like pages in a book, reconstructing the exact depth and extent of these vanished lakes. The presence of all this water meant the entire ecosystem was radically different. Waterfowl would have filled the skies in massive flocks. Fish populations thrived in the lakes and connecting streams. Freshwater shellfish, turtles, and amphibians were abundant. The marshes and wetlands around the lake edges would have been incredibly productive environments, offering reeds and cattails for basket making, edible roots and tubers, nesting areas for birds, and hunting grounds for aquatic mammals. For the people living at Rimrock Draw, these water sources weren't just convenient. They were the foundation of survival, providing drinking water, food sources, and attracting the large game animals they hunted. The competition for survival. Here's something that doesn't get talked about enough when we discuss Ice Age archaeology. The humans at Rimrock Draw weren't the only predators in this landscape. They were competing with some of the most formidable carnivores that ever lived in North America. The extinct American lion, which was larger than modern African lions, prowled these grasslands hunting the same prey that humans targeted. Saber-toothed cats, specifically Smilodon fatalis, were apex predators perfectly adapted to taking down megafauna. Their massive canine teeth could deliver devastating bites to thick-skinned animals like bison and camels. Dire wolves, which were larger and more robust than modern gray wolves, hunted in packs and could bring down animals many times their size. Short-faced bears, the largest predatory land mammals in North America, stood over 6 feet tall at the shoulder and could run at speeds up to 40 miles per hour. Humans had to be constantly aware of these threats. A hunting party tracking a herd of bison might suddenly find themselves being tracked by a pride of American lions. A kill site could attract scavengers and predators from miles around, drawn by the smell of blood. People couldn't just leave their camps unguarded, especially at night when many of these predators were most active. This is where fire became more than just a tool for warmth and cooking. Fire was protection. Most large predators are naturally afraid of fire and will avoid it. A Well-maintained fire at the entrance to Rimrock Draw rock shelter would have kept dangerous animals at bay during the night. The shallow overhang of the rock shelter itself provided some protection, as most large carnivores prefer open spaces where they can maneuver. But humans still had to be vigilant, skilled, and brave to survive in a landscape filled with predators that saw them as potential prey or competition for resources. The lost knowledge and forgotten skills. Think about everything the people at Rimrock Draw had to know just to survive one season. They needed to understand animal behavior patterns, knowing when and where different species would migrate based on seasonal changes. They had to recognize hundreds of different plant species, knowing which were edible, which were medicinal, which were poisonous, and when each one would be available for harvest. Weather prediction was crucial. Reading cloud formations, wind patterns, animal behavior, and other natural signs to predict storms, temperature changes, and seasonal shifts. Navigation skills allowed them to travel across vast landscapes without maps or compasses, using stars, landmarks, sun positions, and natural features to find their way. Water sourcing was essential knowledge, understanding where to find water in different seasons, how to identify safe drinking sources, and how to transport and store water. The craftsmanship required to create stone tools is something modern people rarely appreciate. It's called knapping, and it's an incredibly complex skill that takes years to master. You need to understand the properties of different types of stone, how they fracture, what angles to strike them at, how much force to apply. One wrong strike, and you ruin hours of work. The tools found at Rimrock Draw show expert-level knapping skills, indicating these people had been practicing and refining their techniques for generations. Here's what really gets me. Almost all of this knowledge is gone. When those cultures disappeared or changed, much of their specific environmental knowledge died with them. Modern archaeologists can study the artifacts they left behind, but we can never fully recover the depth of understanding these people had about their world. We're looking at the shadows of a knowledge system that was probably more sophisticated in its own way than we give it credit for. They couldn't write it down, but they lived it every single day. That knowledge was survival, and survival meant absolute mastery of their environment in ways we can barely comprehend today. The discovery at Oregon's Rimrock Draw rock shelter reveals an 18,000 years old settlement with stone tools marked by the blood of extinct Ice Age animals. Humans lived alongside camels and giant bison in ancient grasslands and lakes. This find reshapes North America's migration timeline and humbles us, honoring indigenous histories and humanity's enduring adaptability. Do you think even older human settlements in North America are waiting to be discovered? Share your thoughts in the comments.